Have you ever had a morning where the world is quiet, but your heart feels anything but? Maybe it began at your kitchen table, the same place you've sat for years, a cup of tea warming your hands, the light coming through the window, the house breathing in its early silence, and then, without warning, a familiar heaviness rises in your chest. Not fear, not sadness, just a tiredness that doesn't come from the body, a tiredness that comes from decades of holding everything together at a certain age. We don't chase big dreams anymore. We chase something softer, a quiet we can finally rest inside. But no one ever taught us how to find it, did they? I'm wisdom quiet, and today I want to sit with you, not as a teacher, not as a guru, but as someone who also knows how heavy life can feel when you've lived long enough to hold 1,000 stories. If something in these words touches a memory in you, you're welcome to share it below. This space grows through quiet conversations, not noise, so take a slow breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders soften just a little. Maybe it's time to stop trying so hard to manage life and start listening to the part of you that's been asking for peace for years. When was the last time you allowed yourself to simply sit without fixing anything? Today, we'll walk together through a gentle journey, a return to the calm center within you, the one you may have forgotten, but never lost. Let's begin. Part 1. The invisible weight of control. Have you ever wondered why you feel so tired? Even on the mornings when you've slept well, when the house is calm, when nothing is technically wrong. It's a strange kind of fatigue. Not in the muscles, not in the bones, somewhere deeper. A quiet heaviness you've carried for years without ever naming it. Maybe it happens in a moment. Like this, you're sitting at your kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, sunlight spreading softly across the counter. The world is peaceful, yet inside, something still feels tight, as if your heart hasn't exhaled in decades. Most people think this tiredness comes from age, but those who've lived long enough know the truth. You get tired not from growing older, but from holding everything together for too long. I once met a woman named Mary. She was 72. She told me, "I haven't truly relaxed since the day my first child was born. My mind doesn't know how to stop working." Even now, retired and living alone, she still wakes at 3 a.m., thinking about her son's marriage, her granddaughter's asthma, a bill she might have forgotten to pay. Even though she hasn't missed a payment in 40 years, she's not exhausted because she's weak. She's exhausted because she has been the strong one for so long. Maybe you know that feeling too. For decades, you were the backbone, the planner, the caretaker, the calm in the storm, the one everyone leaned on without even noticing. And slowly, quietly, your mind learned a dangerous belief: if I don't keep everything under control, something will fall apart. But here is the tender truth. Control was never peace. It was survival. And survival has a way of wearing us down even when we don't realize it. Perhaps the tiredness you feel isn't a sign of decline, but the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where you no longer have to hold the whole world in your hands. Take a slow breath. Notice what your shoulders do. Notice the space in your chest. The space that has been asking for attention for a very, very long time. When did you first become the one who held everything together for everyone else? Because once you can see this invisible weight, you can begin to loosen your grip. And when the grip softens, even just a little, peace finally has room to enter. In the next part, we'll explore something surprising, that much of your exhaustion doesn't come from life itself, but from the habit of reacting to every voice, every comment, every storm around you, and how learning to be like a mountain, steadfast and unmoved, can change everything. Let's continue. Part 2, Echo or Mountain. Have you noticed that as you get older, the smallest comment, the smallest tone, seems to stay with you longer than it used to? A single remark in the morning, and by evening, it's still echoing inside you. Not loudly, just persistently, like a quiet knock you can't ignore. This is one of the surprising things about growing older. Life gets quieter on the outside, so the inner noises become easier to hear. A woman once told me, when I was younger, I didn't have time to feel hurt. Now the days are slower, and the echoes stay longer. Maybe you felt this too. Someone makes a quick comment about your memory. Someone sighs when you ask them to repeat something. Someone raises their voice without meaning to, and suddenly the mind takes it, holds it, turns it over, and plays it again and again, long after the moment has ended, not because you're fragile, but because you've lived long enough to feel more deeply. This is what the Buddhists call reactivity, the automatic habit of answering every disturbance, even the small ones. But here is the truth most people overlook. You are not tired because of what people say. You are tired because of the echo you carry. Let me share a story with you. Robert, he told me about a moment with his daughter. She said gently, "Dad, you already told me that." And suddenly he felt something sink inside him. Not just embarrassment, but a quiet fear he didn't want anyone to see. He carried that echo for days. Not the words themselves, but the meaning he attached to them. And that is where peace is lost. Because when the heart echoes everything it receives, the world doesn't need to shout to disturb us. A whisper is enough. But you are not only an echo. You can also be the mountain. Mountains don't shout back. Storms roll in. Storms roll out. And the mountain remains, steady, grounded, unchanged. I once watched an elder monk being criticized harshly by a visitor. The man's words were sharp and emotional. The monk simply listened, bowed his head, and returned to sweeping the courtyard. Later he said, "If I answer his storm with my own, the storm lives longer. But if I remain still, it ends with him, not with me." There is a kind of strength that doesn't look like power, but like stillness. What echo have you carried this week? Longer than you needed to. Because this is the beginning of peace. Not changing others, but changing how long you let their words live inside you. When you learn to stop echoing, the storms around you soften. The days feel lighter. The heart grows spacious again. In the next part, we'll explore a lesson as gentle as a leaf touching water. A way to see your thoughts without becoming them, and your emotions without drowning in them. Let's continue. Part 3, Leaf on the Water. Have you ever watched a leaf fall onto a quiet pond? It doesn't sink. It doesn't fight. It doesn't ask why the wind pushed it there. It simply rests and lets the water carry it. Our thoughts, when we get older, don't feel that gentle, do they? Some mornings you wake up and your mind is already crowded. Old regrets, anxiety about health, worry about your children or grandchildren, memories you thought you buried years ago. The mind becomes a busy lake, and every falling leaf feels like a storm. But here is something most people never learn. Even after living 70 or 80 years, you are not the leaf. You are the water. Let me tell you about Linda, 74. She once told me, "My thoughts feel like visitors who never knock. They just walk in, sit down, and start talking." When she made a small mistake, forgot a name, misplaced her glasses, her mind attacked her with fears. "I'm slipping, I'm losing myself. What if something's wrong with me?" But slowly, through practice, Linda learned something important. The thoughts themselves weren't the problem. The grabbing was, she told me, when I stopped fighting the thoughts and just watched them come and go. Something inside me relaxed for the first time in years. This is one of the deepest Buddhist teachings. We suffer not because thoughts appear, but because we believe every thought is true in meditation. Monks learn to watch the mind the way you'd watch leaves floating across a pond. A worry arrives. You notice it. A memory rises. You acknowledge it. A fear whispers. You breathe with it. You don't push it away. You don't cling to it. You simply watch, and slowly, quietly, the mind begins to settle, like water returning to stillness after a tossed pebble. What thought has been visiting you lately? Not because it's true, but because you keep believing it. Thoughts are not commands. They are weather patterns. They pass when you stop trying to control them. Take a breath here. Imagine your thoughts as leaves light, temporary, drifting. Notice how different life feels when you stop wrestling with the mind, and simply witness it, because when the mind becomes water again, peace returns on its own. In the next part, we'll move from the quiet pond to a lesson about strength that may surprise you. Why the strongest people later in life are often the ones who no longer need to win. Let's continue. Part 4. Strong enough not to win. There comes a time in life when winning stops feeling like victory and starts feeling like exhaustion. When we were younger, we argued to prove a point. We pushed to be right. We fought to make sure others understood us. It felt important then, almost necessary. But somewhere along the way, maybe in your 50s, maybe in your 70s, you begin to realize something softer, something wiser. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every argument deserves your peace. I once spoke with a man named Harold, 76 years old. He told me about a heated conversation with his brother, a disagreement they had carried for decades. Halfway through the argument, Harold felt something inside him shift. He said, "I looked at my brother, and I realized we've been having the same fight for 40 years, and neither of us was happier for it." So he tried something new. He stopped arguing. He simply said, "Okay, I hear you," and he let it go. His brother was shocked. He expected the usual debate, the familiar cycle, but that day, Harold didn't take the bait. Later, he told me, it felt like dropping a heavy stone I didn't know I'd been carrying. At a certain age, you discover a quiet kind of strength, the strength to not react, to not prove yourself, to not engage, because fighting doesn't make us powerful, even when we win. What makes us powerful is choosing peace when the world expects a battle. Think about it. Every argument, every small conflict, every moment you feel the urge to correct someone, it pulls energy from your heart, energy you have spent decades building, energy you deserve to save for gentler things. Let me tell you something quietly. True, people who love arguing aren't looking for truth. They're looking for reaction. And when you refuse to react, their storm stops with them, not with you. When was the last time you chose to win? but ended up feeling tired instead of peaceful. Sometimes the greatest strength is stepping back, not because you're wrong, but because your peace matters more than being right. And maybe, in the quiet moments of your later years, you'll discover that peace isn't something you win. It's something that blossoms the moment. You stop needing victory. Take a breath here. Feel the space opening inside your chest when you imagine simply, not engaging, not correcting, not defending. You don't lose anything. You actually gain something precious. You're calm, and that calm becomes your anchor, the inner stability you will need for the next part of this journey. Because next, we'll explore how the mind becomes an untamed tiger when fed with fear and worry, and how, with the right nourishment, it can become your guardian instead of your enemy. Let's continue. Part 5. Feeding the inner tiger. What your attention is doing to you there. An old saying in some Buddhist circles. Inside you lives a tiger. You choose every day whether it becomes your protector or your destroyer. Most of us don't realize we're feeding this tiger constantly. Not with food, but with attention. When you're younger, your mind can handle a lot of noise. Stress rolls off more easily. You bounce back faster. But as we age, the mind becomes more sensitive, more absorbent, like a sponge that has already lived through decades of storms. That's why what you pay attention to matters, more now than it ever has before. Let me tell you about Marjorie, 72. She told me that each morning, before she even got out of bed, she'd reach for her phone and scroll through the news. Every headline, violence, disaster, political conflict, felt like feeding raw meat to something wild inside her. She said, I didn't notice it at first, but around 10 a.m. I'd already feel anxious. Nothing had gone wrong in my life, yet I felt unsettled for the rest of the day. Then she heard a simple teaching from a monk. Your attention is nourishment. Whatever receives it, grows. So she tried something small. For 1 week, instead of feeding the tiger news and worry, she fed it something else. Gentle music, slow breathing, a cup of warm tea on her porch while watching the sun rise. By the 3rd day, she felt calmer. By the 7th, she felt like a different person, not because her life changed, but because the tiger inside her did. Here's the part most people miss. Your thoughts don't just happen to you. They respond to what you feed them. Worry feeds the anxious tiger. Comparison feeds the bitter tiger. Regret feeds the grieving tiger. Anger feeds the restless tiger. But presence feeds the wise tiger. Gratitude feeds the gentle tiger. Kindness feeds the protector tiger. You choose, even without realizing it, what grows inside you. Let's make this simple. If your inner world feels heavy, chaotic, or loud, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've been feeding the wrong tiger for a very long time. In the last 24 hours, what have you fed your mind most? Fear or calm? Noise or silence? Storm or sunlight? Attention shapes your inner world. What you feed becomes your future. Take a slow breath here. Imagine that tiger inside you, not frightening, but powerful, sacred, waiting for guidance. It doesn't need to be defeated. It needs to be fed differently. And that brings us to the next part of our journey. Because sometimes, even when you feed the right things, life still puts a wall in front of you. A wall you cannot break, no matter how hard you try. Let's continue to Part 6. When you hit the wall, aging, family. and the things you can't fix there. Comes a moment in every long life when you realize something quietly painful. Some things will not change. No matter how much you love, how hard you try, or how deeply you hope. It doesn't mean you've failed. It simply means you've met the wall, the part of life that is not yours to fix. For many of us, the wall first appears through the body. Maybe you used to walk miles without thinking, and now your knees remind you of every decade you've lived. Maybe you used to remember every birthday, every appointment, and now little things slip away, not because you're careless, but because time is honest, and the body speaks its truth whether we approve or not. For others, the wall looks like family, a child choosing a path you don't agree with, a sibling who still carries old resentment, a spouse who avoids the conversations you wish you could finally have. You push, you explain, you try to help, but the wall does not move. Let me tell you about Eleanor. 75 years old, her daughter had been struggling for years, unstable work, impulsive choices, relationships that never lasted. Eleanor spent years trying to guide her. Phone calls filled with advice, late-night worry, money sent with hope and fear in equal measure. One day, her daughter told her, "Mum, I hear you, but I'm going to live my life my way." Eleanor cried that night, not from anger, from the realization that she had been trying to shape something that was never in her hands. She told me it felt like pushing a mountain. The mountain didn't move. Only my heart began to bruise. That's what happens when we misunderstand our role in someone else's journey. We think love gives us the power to fix. But sometimes, love is the very thing that asks us to stop. Here is the gentle truth. The wall is not your enemy. It's your boundary. It shows you where your responsibility ends and where another person's life begins. This is one of the hardest lessons for anyone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. Not because we lack wisdom, but because we have lived long enough to see how life can hurt the people we love. But pushing the wall doesn't protect them. It only exhausts us. What wall have you been pushing for years? Through your body, your family, or your past? Even though it hasn't moved an inch. Eleanor eventually learned something quietly powerful. "I stopped trying to save her," she said. "I started simply walking beside her. They talk more now. They laugh more. Their relationship finally breathed again." Acceptance didn't change her daughter. Acceptance changed the space between. Then peace begins the moment you stop forcing outcomes that were never yours to control. Take a soft breath. Here, feel the weight of the wall you've been fighting for so many years. And imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to stop pushing, not giving up, not abandoning hope, just releasing the illusion that you were supposed to fix everything. And what comes next is something tender and beautiful, because real peace is not found in big victories, but in the small, ordinary, sacred acts you perform every single day. Let's continue to Part 7. Peace in the small things. As we grow older, something unexpected begins to happen. The big moments matter less, and the small moments matter more. When you're young, you chase achievements, opportunities, the next milestone, the next chapter, the next version of the life you think you should have. But with age, your heart softens, your priorities shift, and what once looked small, a cup of tea, a quiet morning, the way sunlight rests on the kitchen counter, suddenly feels like medicine. Let me tell you about Sam. 79 years old, He spent most of his life building a business, always chasing the next success, always busy, always moving forward. He told me he believed peace would come later, after he retired, after the kids were grown, after everything finally settled. But later never arrived the way he imagined. One day, after a health scare, his doctor told him, "You need to slow down." But Sam didn't know how. Slowing down felt like giving up, until one morning, while waiting for the kettle to boil, he noticed something simple: the gentle sound of water warming, the thin trail of steam lifting into the light. He said, "I don't know why, but something in that tiny moment felt kinder than all the success I chased." So he started a small practice, every day. One ordinary act done with full presence: washing a dish, watering a plant, folding a towel, sitting beside a window, and he discovered something he had missed for decades. Peace doesn't appear when life gets big. Peace grows when life gets quiet. The Buddha taught this beautifully, that enlightenment is not found in dramatic breakthroughs, but in the quality of attention you bring to the simplest moments of your day. Here's a truth many people don't realize until their 60s, 70s, or 80s. Life is not transformed by what you accomplish. It is transformed by how deeply you inhabit the ordinary moments you used to rush through. What was the last small moment that made you feel unexpectedly calm, even for a few seconds? Small moments aren't interruptions. They are invitations. Gentle doorways back to yourself. Take a soft breath here. Think of the millions of small moments you've lived through without noticing: the warmth of a mug, the softness of your pillow, the quiet hum of your home at night. These moments are not insignificant. They're anchors. Little moments that bring your mind back into the body, back into the present, back into peace. And learning to honor these moments prepares you for what comes next. Because peace isn't only found in the things you do, it is also found in what you release, in how gently you loosen your grip on the things that hurt you. Let's continue to Part 8. Letting go without giving up. A quiet misunderstanding many of us carry as we grow older: the belief that letting go means giving up. Giving up feels like failure. Letting go feels like surrender. And surrender has often been mistaken for weakness. But as the years pass, you begin to discover something the younger version of you could never have known. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. Letting go means you stop suffering from what you cannot change. Let me tell you about Margaret, 78 years old. For more than 20 years, she held on to a painful moment with her sister, a harsh argument during a family gathering. They didn't speak for months, then years, then decades. Every holiday, every birthday, every milestone, Margaret felt a tightness in her chest. She replayed the conversation over and over, examining every hurtful word, every sentence she wished she had said differently. She told me I wasn't holding the memory. The memory was holding me. One afternoon, her granddaughter asked her, "Grandma, why don't you call Aunt Carol?" A simple question, but it cracked something open inside her. Margaret realized she had spent 20 years waiting for an apology, waiting for her sister to change, waiting for the past to fix itself. But the past never walked through the door, only her pain did. So she made a decision. Not to forget, not to pretend it didn't hurt, but to stop carrying the weight as if it were still happening now. She didn't call her sister immediately. She didn't force reconciliation. She simply whispered to herself, I don't need this pain to stay with me anymore. That was her letting go. Letting go didn't erase the story. It allowed her heart to breathe again. Here is the gentle truth. You can release the suffering without erasing the love, without erasing the history, without erasing the meaning the relationship once held. Letting go is not the end of caring, it's the end of clinging. So many people in their later years carry emotional weight that has nothing to do with today. Old resentments, old mistakes, old expectations, old versions of people who no longer exist. We don't realize how heavy it all is until we begin to set something down. What pain from the past are you still holding, even though it hasn't helped you in years? Letting go isn't losing. Letting go is choosing to stop suffering from what you cannot change. Take a slow breath here. Feel the small space in your chest that opens when you imagine releasing just one thing, one old hurt, one old expectation, one old story. This is not giving up. This is growing lighter, and this lightness prepares you for something deeper, because once you loosen your grip on the past, you begin to see that life is lived in two worlds at once. The outer world that changes without permission, and the inner world that can remain steady no matter what happens. Let's continue to Part 9, Two Worlds, One Heart. As we get older, there's a quiet truth. We begin to understand we live in two worlds. At the same time, there is the outer world, the world of weather and illness, of aging bodies and changing families, of news headlines and unexpected losses. The world of things we cannot slow, cannot predict, cannot control. And then there is the inner world, the world of breath, of awareness, of stillness, of choice, the place inside you that no one else can touch unless you hand them the key. For most of our lives, we confuse these two worlds. We try to manage our inner peace by rearranging the outer world, fixing people, fixing circumstances, fixing the future. But the older you get, the more you realize the outer world will never stop shifting, but the inner world can become steady, like a quiet stone in the middle of a river. Let me tell you about James, 82 years old. He lost his wife of 53 years. The grief was enormous. An entire lifetime of partnership suddenly turned into silence. Friends told him to stay strong, but he didn't feel strong at all. The outer world had collapsed. The empty chair, the quiet house, the routines filled with absence. But James had something he didn't fully recognize until grief arrived. A lifelong practice of mourning stillness every day. Before the world woke up, he sat in his small armchair by the window, hands resting on his lap, breathing, just breathing, he told me, after she passed. The pain didn't disappear, but underneath the pain, there was a ground inside me that didn't break. That was his inner world, the world he had tended quietly for decades, and it held him when the outer world fell apart. This is what the Buddha meant by equanimity, a heart that remains steady even when life does. Not because you're numb, not because you avoid emotion, but because your inner world has become a place of refuge. Instead of reaction, most people discover this late, sometimes too late. They spend years trying to calm the outer storms, instead of strengthening the inner shelter. But you, not later. Not someday, you can begin now. When your outer world becomes chaotic, where do you go inside yourself? Or do you still believe the storm outside must quiet down before you can breathe? You cannot control the outer world, but you can train the inner one, and that inner steadiness is what carries you through everything. Take a breath here. Feel the difference between the world around you and the world within you. One changes endlessly. The other can become a home. And when these two worlds finally meet, when the outer storms come but the inner world stays steady, you begin to understand what real peace feels like. This prepares us for the final part of our journey. A simple map you can return to every day, every year, for the rest of your life. Let's continue to Part 10, your peace practice map. When you reach a certain age, peace stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling like a place you want to come home to. Not a mountaintop, not a monastery, just a quiet space inside you that doesn't shake every time life does. The truth is, peace isn't one big thing. It's not a revelation, not a breakthrough, not a dramatic transformation. Peace is a practice, a set of small, quiet choices you return to again and again. So let me give you what Master Liang once gave me. A simple map for the days when life feels heavy, for the mornings when you wake up worried, for the evenings when old memories pull you back into places you don't want to revisit. It's a gentle compass. 5 practices you can return to any time, anywhere, no matter what the outer world is doing. 1. The 3-breath pause when something disturbs you. Before you respond, before you react, before the moment sweeps you, await 3 breaths. First breath, acknowledge. Second breath, create space. Third breath, choose. You'll be amazed how many storms end before they begin when you give yourself 3 breaths of grace. 2. Watch the leaf, not the ripple. When a thought arrives, a worry, a regret, a memory, don't wrestle with it. Watch it the way you'd watch a leaf floating on water. Let it come, let it drift, let it go. Your freedom begins when you remember you are not the thought, you are the water. 3. Keep score of what you didn't react to every evening. Instead of counting achievements or mistakes, count your moments of peace. The argument you didn't enter, the correction you didn't need to make, the judgment you didn't feed. These are victories of the heart, quiet ones, but the kind that change your life from the inside out. 4. Feed the mind you want to live with. Your mind is like a tiger. It becomes whatever you feed it. Feed it fear. It becomes anxious. Feed it bitterness. It becomes sharp. Feed it awareness, kindness, presence. It becomes your guardian. Every moment of attention is a moment of training. 5. Burn what you can't carry whenever you need to. Write down one thing you keep trying to control but cannot. A resentment, a fear, a story that has overstayed its welcome. Then burn it. Watch it surrender to Ashdod, not because the problem disappears, but because you practice the gesture of release. Do this often enough, and your mind learns that letting go is possible. What practice do you want to return to tomorrow morning? Not as homework, but as a way of coming home to yourself. Peace is not a destination. Peace is a direction, and you can choose that direction again and again. No matter where you stand, take one slow breath here. Feel your chest soften as you remember. Peace is not earned. Peace is practiced, and every small practice is a stone placed gently on the path back to yourself. One day, without even realizing it, you'll notice that the storms still come, but something inside you no longer collapses. Something inside you stays steady, and that's something that quiet. unwavering center is the home you've been searching for all along. If something in this journey touched your heart, I would love to hear which practice you want to begin with. Your reflections help our little wisdom quiet community grow softer and wiser. Together, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. And thank you for choosing peace, even in the smallest ways.